A few days ago, I came across a video of a man by the name of Ali Dawa. He has something like 470,000 subscribers, and his channel is dedicated to, in his own words, spread the message of Islam. In the following clip, he responds to a former Muslim about the Islamic rules surrounding apostasy.
Do you know your religion and Ali Dawa and Muhammad Hijab and Imran, they believe that you should have capital punishment to apostates? And you just want Adam to be like, no, really? Bruv, Adam is taking the mick out of you. This is a part of our religion. There's a reason to it. Yeah, there's a reason why there's a capital punishment, because people like you, little weaklings who leave their religion and cause corruption in the land by spreading it, the capital punishment in Islamic law would be applied to you. We have no doubt, and we're proud of that. Yeah, capital punishment will be applied in an Islamic state. Yeah, not individuals going and doing it themselves like idiots. Yeah, no, under an emir, it is done. Yes, and we, you know what, we'll be watching. We'll be watching, because if you're going to cause corruption in the land, that's going to cause more damage to the society as a whole, because the Sharia didn't come to protect an individual's right. Hey, can I drink alcohol? Yeah, sure. Drink alcohol, run someone over, kill them, set all this kind of chaos. No, Islam says the right of the community is greater than you individual wanting your right to freedom, which is BS. Absolutely BS.
This clip is disturbing for a couple of reasons. First, notice how he uses scare quotes when he's talking about rights to freedom. This is a British Muslim in 2020 who doesn't believe in individual rights and individual freedom. And of course, his support for capital punishment for leaving the faith. The books and traditions, more specifically the Hadith, are very clear on the subject of apostasy, and we'll get to that later. But you don't usually see Muslims being so open about it, let alone saying that they are proud of it.
Capital punishment in Islamic law would be applied to you. We have no doubt, and we're proud of that.
And that when the heads of apostates will be chopped off, he will be watching and smiling, presumably.
And we, you know what, we'll be watching. We'll be watching.
Apostasy in Islam is still a huge problem that isn't talked about all that much. But the problem is way bigger than Islam alone. Many religions either prohibit or restrict their followers from leaving the faith and community. And even though the punishment for leaving isn't always death, it's still a violation of their rights to conscience and their freedom of thought. So in this video, I'm going to discuss some religions that still today limit and prohibit apostasy, both in theory and practice. There are many verses in the Bible that warn against falling away from God and the faith. I'll single out 2 Peter 2, verses 20 to 22 from the King James Version. For if after they have escaped the pollution of the world, through the knowledge of the Lord and Saviour Jesus Christ, they are again entangled therein and overcome, the latter end is worse with them than the beginning. For it has been better for them not to have known the way of righteousness, than, after they have known it, to turn from the holy commandment delivered unto them. We're left to wonder what exactly the fate of those who turned away from God would be. In this world, the here and now, the canon law of the Catholic Church attempts to answer this question. In Book 5, Part 2, Canon 1364 reads, "An apostate from the faith, a heretic or a schismatic incurs an excommunication. A cleric can receive additional punishment." However, apart from laws, traditions and books, religion also consists of a community. And communities might not always be forgiving when one of their own decides to leave the faith. So at least in theory, any religion is potentially intolerant against apostates. But in practice, some are clearly more opposed than others. In this video, I want to have a closer look at 3 religions that put their intolerance of apostasy into practice, namely the Amish, Scientology and Islam. The Amish are a fascinating people, best known for their rejection of modern technology. They drive horse-drawn carts, use no electricity, and they have a really outdated sense of fashion. But apart from that, the Amish are also known for their practice of shunning.
How's it going, man?
Yes, I have decided to shun Andy Bernard for the next 3 years, which I'm looking forward to. It's an Amish technique. It's like slapping someone with silence. I was shunned from the age of 4 until my 6th birthday for not saving the excess oil from a can of tuna.
If members are expelled because of unrepented sin, other church members should avoid or shun the excommunicated members in symbolic ways, such as not eating with them. This shunning, known as Meidung, was not to be a punishment, but rather a lesson, a means of helping the erring member realize the seriousness of their offense against God and the church. Membership of an unrepentant sinner is terminated by a council. After the council has decided, the bishop then says, "In the name of the Lord and the church, peace and fellowship was extended to you, and also in the name of the Lord and the church, it is now renounced." Leaving the faith and being shunned for it carries significant consequences. Ex-Amish often have to leave their family and friends and move away. Social interaction after that is restricted, if allowed at all. Shunning aims to shame the unrepentant sinner to confess and return to God. One sociologist contends that reintegrative shaming, like shunning, is more of a deterrent to deviance in the larger society than the threat of formal punishment. We are social creatures after all. Therapist Jill Mitten left the Exclusive Brethren, a cult-like Christian movement. Her experience won't be exactly the same as an ex-Amish, but most of the things she describes here still apply.
The process of leaving is extraordinarily difficult. You're leaving behind a whole social network, a whole system that you've perhaps been brought up in. You're leaving behind a belief system that you've held for years. There's very often you lose family and friends.
What, because they won't talk to you
Because they
anymore?
won't talk to you anymore. No, that's right. You don't really exist anymore for them.
Can you tell me something about the problems people face when they try to leave a sect like the Exclusive Brethren?
Yes, it affects people in a number of different ways, really. For a start, the sect is a very closed set network. It's their social environment, it's their social network, it's their whole belief system. So when they leave, they're leaving all of that, and they don't know what they're leaving it for, because the outside world is very unknown to them. They're also leaving all their family and their friends behind, because usually when you leave a closed group or a cult, you're not allowed to have contact with people outside at all. So there's a huge sense of loss. When we leave, we actually don't have what we need to survive outside, and yet we should have the right. We have the right to choose to leave, whether it's choosing to leave the religion or choosing to leave the culture, or if they're entwined, then you're leaving both.
Of course, it doesn't help if the rules state that you shall not only be ostracised by your family, but actually killed.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, physically killed, but
Yes.
of course you can also be psychologically killed.
Yes.
And I think that is not so permanent in a sense, but it's still nevertheless devastating.
So shunning is bad and can be traumatic and devastating. You get ostracized, you have to leave your social network, your community, your family and friends. But it isn't all bad. Sinners can always repent and return to the community. The back door is always open, as one Amish man put it. It also doesn't necessarily mean that all social ties are cut off. Interaction with ex-members is restricted, but not forbidden. Shunning is mostly symbolic, so more liberal-minded Amish family members might still invite an ex-member for dinner, but won't be seen with them at public gatherings like weddings. It has been described as tough love for backsliders, or a slap in the face with silence. This brings me to Scientology, Because when you get excommunicated from Scientology, there's no tough love. I know what people are gonna say. Scientology is a cult, not a religion. But to that I would say, what exactly is the difference between those two? How does one distinguish between a religion and a cult? Is it a charismatic prophet? Most religions have that. Is it the fact that you are not allowed to leave most cults? As we see and will see in this video, some religions have that too. Is it the size then? Since cults tend to have fewer followers? But what happens when these cults grow bigger? Do they become a religion?
Every prophet of every major religion can be considered a charismatic leader. In fact, the biggest joke in religious studies is that cult plus time equals religion.
Cult comes from the Latin cultus, meaning to till or cultivate, and in antiquity was used to describe the sacrifices, offerings, and monuments built to cultivate favor with the gods. In time, it came to mean any unorthodox religion.
The Roman Empire referred to Judaism as a cult. Some say that certain versions of Islam are cults. Nowadays, most scholars prefer the word new religious movement.
So the distinction between a cult and a religion is not as clear as one might hope. And since Scientology is officially recognized by the IRS as a religion, I'll regard Scientology as one as well. Scientologists practice disconnection. It's similar to shunning, but worse.
You do not want to provoke non-Scientologists. You save your wrath for the apostates of the religion, and it keeps it closer. You know, this whole phenomenon of disconnection and is what they call breaking off family members and people that are influential. It might open you up to other ideas other than Scientology. Ironically, my very first book was about the Amish, who practiced something very similar. You're cut off from your family, and it's a very cruel practice, I think. But it's enforced, and the Scientologists are far more pernicious in the ways in which they punish their members, and they extract money from them. They actually imprison them on occasion. You know, there's no comparison with how the Amish behave. But
for regular Scientologists, it's already difficult enough to leave. First off, after hours and hours of auditing, the church has extensive knowledge of you. They know about your deepest secrets, your insecurities, your ambitions, your weaknesses, and your failures. Sensitive personal information which they are not afraid to use against you. Then the money. After years in the church, they will have pressured you to donate thousands, tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of dollars to the church. It can be embarrassing to admit that all this money was for nothing.
Okay, give us a few $1,000s. You'll get a nice ribbon or something. You're not going to get any courses from it. And this was new, the idea that you would give them money just to defend against lawsuits. And that grew and grew. Now, Scientologists are constantly under intense pressure just to hand money over.
They pitch themselves as being the underdog, as being the victim. And you identify with that. But then they started hitting you up for bigger donations and bigger, and I got a lot of pressure, and I think I donated another $250,000 to that under pressure. They really know how to do it.
There's one guy who donated $25 million, just straight donation to the Scientology war chest.
Then, of course, there's the sword of Damocles that hangs over everyone's neck. Disconnection. Once you or someone else is labeled an enemy of the church, a suppressive person, church members are not allowed to have any contact with you.
Once you're an enemy, I can't actually talk to you. The policy says that once you are declared, labeled a suppressive person, my association with you would then make me a suppressive person and then me an enemy. So I can't actually talk to you. We were taught a suppressive person is like
An evil person.
An evil with horns.
Right.
They, like Hitler.
Right.
You know, that, you're not thinking it's my mother.
Right.
My daughter.
Church members aren't allowed to even speak to excommunicated family members. Not even your parents or children. One woman was threatened with being labeled an SP, a suppressive person, for keeping contact with her son, who wasn't out of the church himself, but who sometimes worked with an SP. One ex-Scientologist lost his entire family when he left the church. Every day for 5 years, he and his new wife were harassed, stalked, and filmed by Scientologists.
Now repeat the thing.
Stop committing suppressive acts. Full-time suppressive acts. Full-time. Unbelievable. Just end it. Go live a life. Why don't you get a life then? Just get a life. You've had zero effect. None, and nobody gives a fuck about you. That's the truth.
We are doing so well. It's so scary, man.
Nobody has even noticed you're gone, man.
Nobody.
You're nothing.
Hallelujah.
That's
You're
the point.
and
You're nothing.
No cum cycle. Is that what you learned?
Brilliant.
No cum cycle.
Your TRs are brilliant. Why don't you just stop committing suppressive acts and live a real life?
The Church of Scientology will do whatever they can to get you to stay in the church. Financial ruin, blackmail, slander, harassment, intimidation, stalking, you name it.
They were breaking into offices, framing people. This is the activities of a church?
There was a guy who, was a reporter for the LA Times whose dog was poisoned while he was working on a Scientology story.
Again and again, while reporting this story, we met many former members who described Scientology as a dangerous and deeply paranoid organization.
They hire private detectives to harass people.
I have been sued twice.
Financial ruin.
Years of harassment.
Their homes broken into, have them beaten.
We chased her around, we followed her to the airport.
Gotten hold of personal phone records.
Slash their tires, break their car windows.
I was locked in a chicken wire cage.
Dangerous, horrifying, terrifying fraud. A nightmare.
This connection is nothing like the Amish shunning. It's not tough love for backsliders. It's punitive, vindictive, and mean-spirited. But for Sea Org members, that's the clergy of Scientology, leaving is even worse. When L. Ron Hubbard died, this creep, David Miscavige, took over. Honestly, they couldn't have picked anyone who better looks the part of a cult leader than this dude. Just look at the guy. Anyway, in 1993, he won the church tax-exempt status, which in turn gave him the status of a semi-god. He achieved absolute power. And just like what happens with most tyrants and absolute rulers, he got paranoid. He started to mistrust his most senior advisors and Sea Org members. So, he decided to lock them up and subject them to physical and psychological torture.
In 2004, Miscavige ordered the top officers of the Sea Org to Scientology's Gold Base in Southern California. He forced them to live in a pair of double-wide trailers that came to be called the Hole.
The doors had bars put on them, the windows all had bars put on them, and there was one entrance door that a security guard sat at 24 hours a day.
Had to stay there, sleep there. It stunk, and there were ants crawling around. Did you sleep about an hour, 2 hours a night? You were in such a mental state that you're very controllable, very suggestible. We were told we needed to come up with what each other's crimes were against Miscavige and Hubbard so that we could eventually get out of the hole.
Scientology is really good at making you think that you're a scoundrel.
Confess your crimes, confess your crimes. What have you done?
Fights would break out. Miscavige would get me all riled up, and I remember one time Mike had done something or not done something, I don't remember, and I was supposed to go beat him up.
One executive was made to mop up the bathroom floor with his tongue. Another was put into a bucket and pummeled by some of the women and called a lesbian.
There was a very powerful air conditioner which blew straight down, and it was set on maximum cold, and a guy was made to sit in a chair and had water poured on his head until he literally turned blue
Miscavige slapped me across the face, knocked me on the ground, kicked me a couple times.
Flailing fists, kneeing him in the stomach, getting him on the floor.
And you think you want to get up and retaliate. But you also think, I got 75 other people who are all likely to tackle me if I did. And then you get the sheer shock of it. Here's the equivalent of the Pope suddenly knocking you on the ground, and you're thinking, I must have really screwed up.
Dozens of high-ranking Sea Org members were locked up here, some for a period of years. It was guarded 24/7, there were fences, barbed wire and spotlights. Abuse, both mental and physical. There was no getting out. Documentary filmmaker Louis Theroux simulated what the conditions might have been like in the hole.
What the fuck is that doing? Get the fuck up! Fucking DB. Walk! Walk! Fucking crawl! Get down! Lick the fucking floor! Lick the floor!
It may be that every religion carries within it the DNA for its own distinct crimes.
Fucking mental midgets, that's right!
The whole and the allegations of abuse are, in my view, an extreme but logical extension of the principles of Scientology.
Where do you sleep? Answer my fucking question!
On the ground, sir?
Where on the ground? Then I am so frantic, trying to light a fire under your lazy asses since you routinely let everything go to hell the second I don't have a gun to your head.
The Sea Org is imbued with a Spartan warrior ethic, and bull baiting, squirrel busting, and shattering suppression are part of their dogma.
This motherfucker! While I'm busy trying to put things back in order because you fucking degraded beings don't get shit done, look at this fucking org board. Fucking org board! You fucking SP! The way you fucking handling this P? Huh? Is you handle him roughly! You handle him roughly! You fucking handle him roughly! Okay? Okay!
Yes, sir!
Yes!
Yes, sir!
Yes!
The Church denies the existence of the whole and any abuse by David Miscavige. It provides numerous statements from people who say these things just never happened.
Sit down, sit down, sit down!
But there are also many ex-church members who say that they did happen.
Eventually, what they reach and what they aim to reach is not just a state of physical imprisonment, but mental as well. That even if the doors were unlocked, if the police busted down the door, people still wouldn't leave.
Let's say the FBI showed up at the hole and said, "This is the FBI, we're letting everyone out." You think everyone would have said, "Oh, thank God the FBI's here"?
No, I think that everybody, one for one, would have gone, what do you mean? We're doing this voluntarily. We like living in these conditions.
The best traps, you get a guy to just keep himself in jail, right? And that's what Scientology does.
If you want more information on this subject, I'd recommend the Louis Theroux documentary I mentioned earlier, and also the documentary Going Clear by Lawrence Wright. At the end of the day, Scientology is all about control, and they do literally everything they can to stop people from apostatizing. Everything short of murder. When I want to know what doctrine is followed in a certain religion, I look at three things: scripture, authority, and community. What do the Holy Scriptures say about this particular subject? How have the clerics and theologians interpreted these scriptures? And how is this tradition actually lived by the community at large? To answer the first one, let's have a look at the Holy Scriptures of Islam. The Quran has a number of verses that condemn apostasy. Take Surah 3, verse 90 to 91. Indeed, those who reject the message after their belief and then increase in disbelief, never will their claimed repentance be accepted. and they are the ones astray. Indeed, those who disbelieve and die while they are disbelievers, never would the whole capacity of the earth in gold be accepted from one of them, if he would seek to ransom himself with it. For those there will be a painful punishment, and they will have no helpers. Or Surah 16 verse 106 to 107. Whoever disbelieves in Allah after his belief, except for one who is forced to renounce his religion, while his heart is secure in faith. But those who willingly open their breasts to disbelief, upon them is the wrath of Allah, and for them is a great punishment. That is because they preferred the worldly life over the hereafter, and that Allah does not guide the disbelieving people. So the Quran is pretty clear on its view of apostates. And remember, this is supposed to be God's direct word on the page, not just some human middleman. That the Muslim who leaves his faith will suffer a gruesome fate is clear enough. But how that fate will come to him is not. Allah leaves open whether the community has to punish the apostate or that he himself will take care of it, either in this life or the next. So where the Quran comes short, we turn to the Hadith. The Hadith are collections of sayings and traditions of Muhammad and have near equal theological status to the Quran, depending on the validity of the Hadith. Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, the two most reliable Hadith collections, don't shy away from the subject of apostasy. Again, there are many Hadith that go in explicit detail on what to do with apostates, but I'll highlight Sahih al-Bukhari, Book 88, Hadith 5. Narrated Ikrimah. Some atheists were brought to Ali and he burned them. The news of this event reached Ibn Abbas, who said, "If I had been in his place, I would not have burned them, as Allah's messenger forbade it, saying, 'Do not punish anybody with Allah's punishment, fire.' I would have killed them according to the statement of Allah's messenger. Whoever changed his Islamic religion, then kill him." Or Sahih Muslim, Book 28, Hadith 36. Abdullah reported, Allah's messenger stood up and said, "By him, besides whom there is no God but he, the blood of a Muslim who bears the testimony that there is no God but Allah, and I am his messenger, may be lawfully shed only in case of three persons: the one who abandons Islam and deserts the community, and the married adulterer, and life for life." In short, you can kill a Muslim only in three cases: when he cheats his wife, when he has killed another Muslim, and when he leaves the faith. According to Allah's messenger, that is. So those are the holy scriptures of Islam. What do the Islamic scholars think about apostasy? So this is a little tricky, since, like all religions, there isn't one agreed upon interpretation of scripture. There are people involved in interpretation, and people have different opinions, so they will come to different conclusions. Having said that, most scholars in Islamic history have agreed that apostasy should be punished with execution.
So, yes, the majority of the Muslim scholars through the tradition are saying kill. But there are scholars from the 8th century saying no, they were in minority.
All four schools of jurisprudence in Sunni Islam and the major school of Shia Islam, respectively Hanafi, Maliki, Shafi'i, Hanbali and Jafari, agree that capital punishment is required for apostasy. Finding a modern Islamic scholar that agrees with this isn't as difficult as one might have hoped it would be.
Like an apostate in any country, if suppose a person working in the army, a soldier of an army, sells the documents of the country to the enemy, in most of the countries either it is death penalty or it is a punishment of life imprisonment. If suppose an army general or a soldier sells the secrets of the country to the enemy, in most of the countries either it will be put to death or it will be life imprisonment. This is nothing but treason. So similar in Islam, if someone leaves the religion and propagates the wrong faith, it is like treason, and in Islam the punishment is death, but the death penalty cannot be given by a normal human being. It will have to be in a court of law, and the Qazi will have to be appointed. He will give him chance to accept Islam, and then only if he is completely convinced
that the person has become a murtad, then can the Qazi in an Islamic state, not in a normal country. If the country is not an Islamic state, you cannot give death penalty. It cannot be in a democratic country. It will be an Islamic state, that also the Qazi, the chief judge will have to see the situation and only he can give death penalty. Hope that answers the question.
Leaving your faith is a shock for your immediate family. And sometimes people exercise this pressure, maybe thinking that once the pressure is exercised, the person will think about it, reconsider the matter, maybe come back to the faith.
And by pressure, do you mean?
Social pressure, maybe psychological pressure. Different people have different ways of exercising, maybe bullying, maybe emotional blackmailing, whatever. Different people from different faiths exercise different ways.
And but you think that's wrong?
Not in all cases, not all types of pressure. If we understand Islam as a comprehensive way of life, which is, then of course leaving Islam will change everything. And as I told you, it includes changing the political allegiance, the social life. So it is treachery to Islam. If he has committed that, then in an Islamic state before an Islamic court, it is like the punishment of treason, because it is treason.
And that punishment is?
As you know, okay, is a capital punishment.
In your so-called caliphate, you'd have me killed, wouldn't you? Wouldn't you have me? Am I an apostate that deserves death? If I'm judged an apostate by a Sharia court judge, will I be executed in your caliphate? Answer that question.
You know very well that you have left the deen of al-Islam because you side with the enemies of Islam against the Muslims.
As a judge,
the one who stands with them is one of them.
So will I be executed as an apostate in your caliphate?
You've asked him about apostasy.
This question is getting to Michael Howard levels. You've asked it dozens of times. You're not going to answer.
Submit to yourself.
You're not going to answer the question, right?
It's a ridiculous question. He knows the answer to it already.
So these guys support capital punishment for apostasy, at least in theory. As you've heard them say, this doesn't mean that they will go around chopping the heads off of every ex-Muslim they can find, because they argue that when you live in a Western secular democracy, you have to follow the law of the land. Give to Caesar, which is Caesar's, right? Only in a proper Islamic state and under the right circumstances will leaving the faith actually be punished. Again, this isn't the opinion of all scholars and preachers, but it is a majority view. And finally, the community. What does the Ummah, the global Islamic community, think of apostasy? This one might even be trickier than answering what the Islamic scholars and clerics think about apostasy. It's difficult to talk about 1.6 billion people without making sweeping generalizations. So I'll try to keep it as factual as possible. Obviously, not all or even most Muslims believe that apostates should be killed. There are hundreds of millions of quote-unquote regular Muslims who couldn't be bothered by their neighbors' belief or disbelief. These Muslims might be as religiously illiterate as your average American Christian is about Christianity. They call themselves Muslim because their parents do, and they go to mosque for the same reason. Maybe they pray, maybe they don't, who knows? It's important to remember that perhaps a majority of Muslims don't believe in or follow the laws surrounding apostasy. But it's also important to remember that even a minority in Islam's 1.6 billion people can still amount to hundreds of millions of people. So with that out of the way, let's talk numbers. In 2013, Pew Research conducted a worldwide study about Muslims and their beliefs. One of the questions asked was about apostasy. How many Muslims believe that the death penalty should be given to those who leave Islam? This graphic shows among Muslims who think Sharia should be the law of the land, the percentage who favor the death penalty for apostates. And honestly, this doesn't bode well. Even in Eastern Europe, you find 8 to 15% who favor capital punishment. Secular poster boy Turkey has 17%. Kazakhstan has only 4%.
Great success.
Moderate Indonesia has almost 20%. But then you see Malaysia 62%. Afghanistan and Pakistan almost 80%. I expected some bad numbers here, but still. Egypt and Jordan have even more than 80%. And remember, this study doesn't even include the most religiously conservative countries like Saudi Arabia, Iran, or Sudan. I'm not gonna do all the math here, but even if you take just Egypt, you're looking at more than 60 million people who support the death penalty for apostasy. That's more than 150 times the number of all Scientologists and Amish combined, just in Egypt. In Pakistan it would mean something like 130 million people who support capital punishment. That adds up to almost 200 million people in just Pakistan and Egypt. That's almost 1/5 of a billion people that support death for apostates. In just 2 countries. Unsurprisingly, some countries legislate and criminalize apostasy. A 2014 study of Pew Research found that 25 countries have laws or policies that criminalize apostasy. This includes 70% of the countries in the Middle East and North Africa. A study by the Law Library of Congress found laws criminalizing apostasy in 23 selected jurisdictions. 8 of those make apostasy a capital offense. And some countries, like Iran or Pakistan, have an ongoing debate whether apostasy should be a capital offense. Brunei adopted a law that criminalizes leaving Islam with either imprisonment up to 30 years, corporal punishment or execution only in 2013. In Iran, where the death penalty for apostasy is not yet part of their penal code, the courts can still penalize apostasy and have done so based on fatwas and interpretations of Sharia. Morocco also does not impose the death penalty against apostates, but in 2013 the Supreme Court of Religious Scholars issued a fatwa that Moroccan Muslims who leave Islam must be killed. It has not been implemented, however. Other countries that don't subject the apostate to capital punishment may imprison them, fine them, confiscate their property or annul their marriage. Here I want to show you an interview with Rahaf Mohammed, a 19-year-old Saudi girl who left Islam and had to flee Saudi Arabia and her family. After leaving the faith, she faced abuse by her family, both physical and psychological. Here she tells the story of the hardships she faced as an ex-Muslim and a young woman in Saudi Arabia and how she managed to get out.
What was happening in your life as a teenager in Saudi Arabia that made you so desperately want to get out?
طبعا تعرضت أنا للعنف، لكن حسيت إني ما أقدر أحقق أحلامي اللي أنا أبيها طالما إني عايشة في السعودية.
So what type of violence were you facing?
تعرضت لعنف جسدي واضطهاد وكبت وتهديد بالقتل وحبس لمدة 6 شهور.
Rahaf, why were people threatening you in Saudi Arabia, and who was locking you up and threatening violence against you?
في الأول حبسوني 6 شهور لأني قصيت شعري، فهذا شيء عندهم ممنوع، أو زي ما نقول التشبه بالرجال، هذا أيضا محرم في الإسلام. لكن كنت أتعرض للعنف أكثر شيء من أمي وأخوي.
From your mother and your brother, violence, were they beating you?
يصير في ضرب وعنف جسدي لدرجة أن أحيانا أنزف دم.
How frequently did that happen?
المواقف اللي يعني يصير فيها ضرب جدا عنيف تصير يعني خلال الشهور، لكن بشكل يومي أو شبه يومي من أمي مثلا، عشان ليش ما أصلي، ليش ما أسوي شغل البيت.
Tell me about Kuwait. You went with your family on a holiday. Did you have in your mind when you were in Kuwait, even before, that this was the time you were going to get away?
من فترة تقريبا كنت أحاول أقنع أهلي إن نروح الكويت، لأن طالما إني في السعودية أنا ما أقدر أسافر، لكن في دولة ثانية أنا أقدر أسافر، مسموح لنا. فاستغليت إجازتنا إجازتي مع أهلي خارج السعودية بس عشان أطلع بدون موافقة ولي الأمر.
So that was your plan, to go to Kuwait and then disappear. Were you afraid? Tell me about that. I mean, did you ever think, I can't do this?
كنت خايفة لكن حسيت إن أنا لازم أخاطر بحياتي عشان حريتي. بس أكثر شيء خوفني إنه لو مسكوني راح أختفي ولا أعرف إيش مصيري بعدها.
Did you have in your mind when you were in Kuwait, even before, that this was the time you were going to get away?
كنت ناوية أطلع من الكويت لتايلاند وأجلس يومين لأن حسب ما سمعت ما في سفارة سعودية في تايلاند وبكذا أقدر أقول لأهلي إن أنا عايشة في تايلاند عشان يحسبوني هناك وأقدر أضيعهم ومن تايلاند حطلع على أستراليا أطلب الجواب.
You bought your own plane ticket, you made those arrangements, you paid for it, all without your family knowing?
اشتريت كل شيء وسويت كل شيء بنفس اليوم.
She did everything and all the tickets, she bought them all on the same day.
But you got to Thailand and then tell me what happened.
استقبلني شخص كان رافع لوحة فيها اسمي قال أنا راح أساعدك تسوين فيزا. بعد كذا بعد ما أخذ جوازي وخلاني أنتظر وجاب شرطة كمان قال لي إن أهلك مبلغين عليك واعترف لي إنه هو يشتغل مع السفارة السعودية. بعد كذا حبسوني وأخذوا جوازي وأخذوا كل الإثباتات اللي معي.
Rahaf, what were you thinking at that time?
كنت متوقع إن المصير راح يكون زي قصة صارت قبل سنة نفس قصتي تماما اخطفوها يعني ما حد يعرف عن مصيرها. فبالوقت هذا كنت أفكر برسالة الوداع اللي راح أكتبها لأن ما راح أسمح لهم يأخذوني وكنت على استعداد تام إني أنهي حياتي قبل ما يخطفوني.
Using social media and live streaming, she received international attention and support, and luckily got granted asylum in Canada. A 19-year-old Saudi girl leaving her family's religion should not be trending international news. Yet it was. Honestly, when watching that interview, it felt like the interviewer was talking to someone who left a dangerous cult or something, not a mainstream global religion. One of the three so-called great faiths. It reminds us of the many dangers that religions pose to those who want to leave. Rahaf's miraculous escape also highlights the many Saudi women who try the same but that don't make it and just disappear. She would rather end her own life than to go back to her family. That should tell us something. And just like that, a video like this.
Little weaklings who leave their religion and cause corruption in the land by spreading it, the capital punishment in Islamic law would be applied to you. We have no doubt, and we're proud of that. You know what? We'll be watching. We'll be watching.
Is even more disgusting and tone deaf. Luckily, however, this view of apostasy of this goon Ali Dawa is not shared by every Muslim. And there are scholars that speak out against it on a scriptural basis.
Okay, but the first question we have is about apostasy. So the question is, do you think a Muslim should be free to choose to leave Islam without fear of punishment from his mosque or his country's government? And should he be imprisoned or punished by being beaten, imprisoned, or executed?
The short answer is no, a Muslim should be free. Did I say no? I should be saying I believe that a Muslim should be free to leave Islam if he or she wants to. This is a basic freedom that is guaranteed in the Islamic teachings and in the Quran itself. And in fact, no punishment in the Quran is mentioned for a person leaving Islam, punishment to be given to the person in this life by the Muslim juridical courts.
So why do Muslims seem to think that there is a punishment?
There is a mention in some hadiths that are reported or attributed to the Prophet, peace be upon him. But if we use strict principles of interpreting Islam, first from the Quran, and then if a question is not answered from the Quran, then from the hadith, then we would would have to give preference to the Quran in this regard, which guarantees the freedom of individuals. For example, Surah 18 says, فَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيُؤْمِنْ وَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيَكْفُرْ. Whoever wants, let him believe. Whoever wants, let him disbelieve.
Okay.
Surah 2, verse 256 says, لَا إِكْرَاهَ فِي الدِّينِ. There should be no compulsion in religion. And naturally, if you hold the death penalty over a person's head, then that person is not really free to leave the religion. You're actually holding him, compelling him to remain in the faith. That would be contrary to the Quran.
If anything, I hope this video has shown the inherent dangers of religion, and in some cases the illogical outcome of their dogmas. It can be tempting for lefties to ignore the faults of Islam so as not to mirror right-wing talking points, but sadly, ignoring it won't make it go away. And if anyone needs our support, it's women like Rahaf. In the end, it all comes down to that age-old Catholic axiom, extra ecclesiam nulla salus. Outside of the church, there is no salvation.